Andrew was doing, and so many of you, practically all of you were probably raised on The Simpsons. But when I was a child, there wasn't this kind of like wonderful, satirical, comical, existential television, and it's really due to writers like Michael Price that we have this level of intelligence and wit and acumen on television, which is part of the reason we're so thrilled to have him as part of our faculty. He's a multi-award-winning TV writer. He has a background in theater, and he teaches this wonderful class for us in the summers called In the Room, and he's also teaching a class for us this spring. Tonight what's happening is that we're screening this Star Wars episode, Lego Star Wars, The Padawan Menace, that Michael wrote, and then that will be followed by a conversation with Michael and with Prince, and then we'll have a reception and cookies and snacks, and you can also chat with Michael. So if you feel questions brewing, keep them, and you'll have a chance to meet the writer. And I just want to say a couple of words about Prince, who is an amazing playwright and teaches here in our program. I think this semester he's doing writing compelling characters across genres. He's won many awards, including the Penn Center Award. He's written many plays, including Big Hunk of Burning Love, The Theory of Everything, so just a Mysterious Skin. So you can just tell that his plays are funny and erudite at the same time. He was just selected to be part of this year's Center Theater Writers Workshop, where he's developing a brand new play about Asian American ghost hunters. And that's Prince Gomolvilas. So I think we're going to get started with the screening. Oh, I also want to alert you to the fact that we have a raffle tonight, and I think you all got the raffle tickets. So without further ado, Lego Star Wars, The Padawan Menace. Woo!
The first and most successful Lego licensed product collection happens to be the Star Wars franchise, and it inspired a collection of video games which some of you may or may not have played in the past, and those video games have sold 25 million units worldwide so far. So it's very popular, and the video games, of course, inspired this animated special titled Lego Star Wars: The Padawan Menace. And the program originally aired on the Cartoon Network. It's now available on DVD and Blu-ray. And the writer of Lego Star Wars: The Padawan Menace is here with us today. He is Michael Price. He's an Emmy Award and Writers Guild Award-winning writer-producer who's been working on The Simpsons for the past 10 years. So please welcome Michael Price. For sharing that, Michael. That was so fun.
It's really fun to see it with an audience. You know, the only other time before now that I've seen it with an audience was at the show debuted on the Cartoon Network during Comic-Con weekend in July, and so we had a little screening of it down there at Comic-Con, and then we had a panel, just the Lego Star Wars panel. Mostly about toys, and then they showed a few clips from the show.
Adjust this for the recording.
Super Lego Star Wars fan. So that was fun to see.
One of my favorite parts of the program is when they're in the Senate chamber and the characters are talking in the Senate chamber. They're like blah 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 blah, because that's how you felt when you watched all those Star Wars movies. And when I was thinking about that, I was thinking about how impressed I am with how much you're able to accomplish in such a short period of time, and how huge of a responsibility that you had on your shoulders, because Michael had to do a lot of things with this. He had to honor like the Star Wars mythology. He had to make fun of Star Wars tropes. He had to integrate and be inspired by Lego's the Lego Star Wars video games. He had to appeal to adults and kids. So how difficult was it to juggle all these battle orbs?
It was.
See what I did there?
It was incredibly fun. I will say, how this came about for me just briefly was that I originally had a meeting with the people behind Robot Chicken, Matthew Senreich and Seth Green, who are putting together a Star Wars show of their own right now that I believe is called Detours. And they were looking for writers to work on that. And so I had a meeting with those guys and some people from Lucas, and they did want me to work on it, but it would have been impossible to do because it would have involved going away for a couple of weeks. It would have been wonderful. It would have been going away for 2 or 3 weeks up to the Bay Area and like living at the Skywalker Ranch and working on these scripts. So I was really bummed that I couldn't do it. But then the people from Lucas and I think Matthew and Seth who met me had recommended me to Lego, and this thing came about a few months later. And this was a submission process where they went out to several writers, I don't know how many others besides myself, and just said, we want to do this show. It's based sort of on the aesthetic and of the games, and just come up with a story idea and just pitch it. And they asked us all to write a 4 or 5 page treatment, and this was the story that I pitched. And so they just picked my story out of, I don't know what the other ones were. But what they impressed on was that it should, exactly what you said, it should take place somewhere in the Star Wars universe, in places and characters that were seen in the 6 movies and also the Clone Wars TV series that they're doing right now. Have fun with the Lego-ness of it, but also have fun and be whimsical, have fun with Star Wars. And so it just sort of came very organically to me. I had this image in my mind. I knew it would be fun to have C-3PO and R2-D2, who are among my favorite characters, and they're really fun. And also
that was, and C-3PO was voiced by the original C-3PO.
That's the guy. Yes, he did it. I haven't had a chance to meet him because he just did it over like a satellite hookup from London. But he was fantastic. And so the idea of kids and that they were the younglings. Originally I pitched it was the younglings. And then I said no. I thought to myself, no, they get killed later in Revenge of the Sith. They all get slaughtered. So I thought maybe we don't want to do that. So I had just kids, just kids on a field trip. So then the people from Lucas said, no, make it the younglings. It's okay, don't worry about it. We know they get killed later, but that's a different story. So the idea of them on a field trip and they get lost, and then 3PO and R2-D2 have to sort of help them was the first idea that I had. And then I had that image in my mind, that's the opening image of the movie, of the show, of the bus going past, like the beginning of episode 4 of Star Wars, stuck in my mind. It's like, that would be a funny image to see. It's a bus and not a big giant Star Destroyer. And then it just all sort of just, it's hard to describe it, but it sort of came from that. And I thought, oh, then we can have this, and then we can have Yoda. And then I hit on this kid, and then I realized, oh my God, this kid could be young Han Solo, and
that's
it all sort of
came
together. Yeah, it all just came together, and it was all in the original pitch. And so then in terms of the writing of it, once they told me that they bought my idea and they contracted me to write it, and I did go up and spend an afternoon up there in San Francisco. Not at the Skywalker Ranch, but where Lucasfilm was located. Now their headquarters is now in the Presidio area of San Francisco, which was an amazing experience because it was basically like a lunch and like a 1-hour meeting.
So who did you meet with?
I met with a man named Howard Rothman, who is Lucasfilm's head of all licensing, and he's been with Lucas for I think 30 years when The Empire Strikes Back came out. So he's in charge of all licensing. There's a man named Derek Stothard he works at Lucas, but he's just in charge of Lego. He's the Lego guy at Lucas. and then with a woman named Kathleen Fleming, who was the person from Lego who originated the project. And that was it. And then we just talked through. They had a few notes, they had a few thoughts. But Howard, who was very close to George Lucas, he's sort of like the number 2 or number 3 guy at all of Lucasfilm. Was incredibly supportive, incredibly just sort of like, just go with what you want to do, just be funny, don't worry about any kind of joke you want to make, because I think there were some pitches in the original story that were sort of along the lines of, the kids find the Senate boring and R2-D2 falling asleep and all that stuff. And he was just go with it. It's totally fine. Don't pull any punches. And so when I wrote the stuff like Jar Jar gets killed, they were like, "Oh, that's great. It's wonderful." They were totally into it.
How satisfying.
I know. And then Anthony Daniels, one of the great things he did, he ad-libbed that line because I think in the script, Jar Jar gets killed, and he goes, "Oh, poor Jar Jar," or something like that. And then. But he's the one that ad-libbed like, oh well, like, no big deal. So he was great. He was fantastic.
So were you given any parameters at all at the initial meeting?
No,
wow.
just like, they just basically said, write a script, take your best shot. I wrote an outline first, I believe. Or no, the outline was sort of in the pitch. So then it was just like, just come back in a couple of weeks with your first draft of the script and we'll take it from there. And it was there was nothing really in terms of...
Wait, how long for the first draft?
I think I had like 2 or 3 weeks to write the first draft, which is about what normally that we, like on Simpsons, we get like 2 weeks to write a draft of the script. It might have been a little bit longer than that. But they were on a time crunch. They were like, we want this to come out next... This was like last August of 2010, and they said we want this to be out ready by next summer. So like, I had to get going on. But I just said, I'm just going to take my shot. I'm just going to, because I can always say no later. Don't do that, but I figured I'd just go push the envelope, whatever, as far as I thought I could. Also realizing that it was aimed at, family audience and kids. But also sort of do some of my favorite things, my takes on Star Wars, whatever, and stuff that hasn't already been done by Robot Chicken and by Family Guy, they've sort of covered everything. So when I discovered that little moment with the Emperor and his hood being up and down, I was like, oh, I finally got something that hasn't been done yet. That kind of Superman moment with him. And they really had no content notes at all. Like, we're not going to do this, we can't make fun of this. It was more just about budgetary things, like the little scene that ends with the Tauntaun, and that originally was a big scene that I had written in a warehouse full of battle droids, like 100 battle droids, all fighting Yoda. And the director said, there's no way we can afford this. This is going to cost too much, so it could be something really simple. So that's what we did.
What was your relationship with Star Wars prior to this? Was it you just a fan, or
I would say
video games also? I'm curious.
I would say, as far as Star Wars is concerned, I'm old enough that I was in high school when the original movies came out, so I was always a big fan of it. I never was sort of super obsessive to the point of like knowing every little thing or reading all the books that came out in subsequent years. But I always loved it, and then it sort of came and went. Whenever a new one would come out, whenever the reissues came out, I always went to see it.
What was your favorite Star Wars movie?
Empire Strikes Back. Of course.
Can I say something controversial right now? My favorite Star Wars movie is Return of the Jedi.
Well,
because of the Ewoks. They're awesome. They're awesome.
Well, yeah.
My friends hate me when I do.
They're even awesome now that they have eyelids. They have eyelids now. That's what in the new Blu-rays that came out. That's one of the fixes that they made, is they added eyelids, digital eyelids to the Ewok. Because they originally were like just a suit with like glassy eyes, and so then somebody went back through it and like you get Blu-rays now, like they have eyelids and stuff like that. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that just makes the movies better and better as they change things. Well, for me, Empire Strikes Back, it was because I was really excited about it. My best friend, I was in college then by the time it came out. We went to see it. This was way before internet and stuff like that, so we didn't know much about it. And I purposely didn't want to read anything about it. There was like a review in Newsweek that sort of gave some stuff away, and I was mad that I read it. I didn't want any spoilers. This is even before the word spoiler was even a word. And then when we saw it, and when that moment when he says, "I'm your father," it was literally like the most jaw-dropping moment of my entire movie-going life. My friend and I were both like, we were screaming no like louder than Luke Skywalker. Oh no! And after the movie was over, we were so excited. We were at this movie theater in New Jersey, and we hid like in the bathroom or something, and we snuck back. We were sold out, you know. We snuck back in and saw it again. You know, we were just so thrilled. So that will always be the movie for me. But a little controversial, or maybe not controversial, to me. Like that moment when he says, "I'm your father," is both the greatest moment in all of Star Wars, but also the worst in a way, because of that, then everything else all the other stuff has to happen. Like Darth Vader has to be the good guy that turned bad, you know. There's something that was great about the original, I call it original Star Wars, or episode 4, where it's just like a good guy and a bad guy, you know. So then that necessitated the whole rest of the story about that he was a good guy who turned bad, and that's why I don't like Return of the Jedi, especially the end of it, where he's suddenly okay again, you know. And it's like, well, I killed all these people, but I'm okay now, you know. And especially in the original version, when they're all lined up at the end, all the ghosts are lined up, and Yoda's there, and Obi-Wan, and there's the guy who's supposed to be Anakin, right? He's this guy, and he's sort of standing there, kind of like, he's sort of like, yeah, you know, I killed all those people, but it's okay now, you know. So anyway, that's the one on that.
So did you play the Lego Star Wars games? Were you familiar with those games?
I really wasn't. My son, I have a son who's 14 now. He was into Legos, the toys, and building sets. He was not into Star Wars. I tried to expose him to Star Wars by I would get the DVD and show it to him, but he didn't really care about it that much. He likes it now, but he liked to build Legos, and he also liked there's a Lego world called Bionicles. I don't think that's Bionicles. So there was a time when he was around 8 or 9, where he had to have every single one. Like at Christmas time, it was like he had a whole giant list of all, and they all have these crazy, interesting names, you know. So he was really into that. So that joke about like Lego instruction manuals, how that works, that comes from my experience of like work building with them, being incredibly frustrating. There's no words. and they're all like very, like this one is light blue, this one is a little darker blue, you know, it's really impossible. So we'd be in the middle of making these things, and I thought I had it all together, and then I realized that at step 2 I used the wrong things.
Right. So are there more planned of Lego Star Wars?
Well,
series?
not officially, but unofficially, I think we're talking about doing another one. I'd love to do it. You know, I'm excited about doing another one, but I can't. It's not officially it's not officially in the works, but I know they'd like to do another one.
Cool. Let's go back in time a little bit. You actually come from a theater background,
yes,
correct?
Yes,
so talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, just as a kid growing up, it sort of came full circle because as a kid growing up in New Jersey, I just watched TV all the time. I was just a total TV head. I grew up in the New Jersey area where this was before cable as well, where there were like 5 channels, and they all showed all the old movies, all the old comedians. I was totally into comedy, like W.C. Fields and the Marx Brothers and Abbott and Costello. But at the same time, my only outlet for it was like to do theater. So I did theater acting through high school, and I was a theater major in undergraduate school in New Jersey at Montclair State College. It's called Montclair State University now. And then I went on to graduate school in directing, theater directing at Tulane University in New Orleans. And then when I got out of there, I still didn't know what I was going to do. And some friends of mine who, back in New Jersey, had started a small theater company in Newark, New Jersey, of all cities, and I joined with them, and I worked directing plays, writing some plays, and acting. But still comedy, sort of comedy performing or comedy writing was still a thing that I was interested in, and I eventually, in addition to working on the theater, I started working in New York City at a daytime survival job type thing, but then getting involved in doing improv comedy in New York with a company called Gotham Improv that taught me to sort of do like improv theater games, and then also as a way of turning that into writing, like we do an improv exercise, and then in the middle of the exercise you come up with a character or a bit or a situation, and the teacher would say, okay, now go home and write a monologue for that character. So that was sort of initial training of how to write dialogue, how to write scenes, and how to write characters.
Yeah, I mean, how much does that theater background and the improv background sort of inform what you do now?
Oh, 100%, 100%.
In what ways?
Well, especially because what I do, the life of a person who works as a staff, on a staff of a TV comedy show, is all about collaboration, is all about, you're in a room with 7 or 8 other people where you are pitching ideas. And so the training, the improv training, the very first lesson you get when you take improv is called yes-anding, which is to say, if someone comes to you and says, with like a pantomime saying, like, here's your coffee, you don't go, that's not coffee, that's my gun. You take it and you go, oh yes, and thank you, oh, it's very tasty, and then they go, yes, I made it, and then you build the scene that way by sort of taking the other person's idea, agreeing with it, and then trying to build on it.
So you never shut down an idea?
No,
that's like energy.
That's like the cardinal sin of improv, is to sort of come with your own preconceived idea. So like for instance, like I said, here's your coffee. This is my gun. And you're like, it's over. So
no, it's not.
That's drilled into you. It's literally this. You do like an hour of exercise, which is just called yes and, where someone says, wow, that was a great dinner last night. Yes, and the movie we saw afterwards was better. And it's all about building, but it's all that about collaborating and being able to give and take with other people. So the life of working life of a sitcom television writer is all that. It's all sort of, if we're working on The Simpsons, if we're working on a scene, there'll be, either the scene is already written and we're rewriting it, or it's a fresh new scene, and we'll say like, okay, we need something for Homer to be doing. So someone will pitch, well, what if they're at the beach? Okay, then yes, but then now this happens, and it's all sort of working together and riffing on someone else's stuff and building it. Or if it's pitching dialogue, it's very similar. Like someone will pitch a joke, and then you may take that and go, oh yeah, but then what if this happened? So it's all of that. So that I'd say that improv training at that Gotham City Improv was the foundation of everything.
So take us inside the Simpsons writers' room. Like, what does it look like? There's a table and chairs. And who's there? What are they doing?
There's a big long table with a bunch of chairs around it, and then there's a big screen TV, not super big, that is connected to the computer that the writer's assistant uses, so we can see the script in front of us.
So what is the writer's assistant doing?
She sits at her computer, and so then she goes down through the script. So let's say we're on the scene that's already been written, and you see it on there. So there's one person who is in charge of the room. He's the room runner. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's somebody else. Often it's our executive producer, Al Jean, or someone else. And they'll say, okay, well here's this line, this Homer line, we need a better line here than what it is there. So then everyone starts thinking, and when you come up with an idea for the new line, you pitch it. You just say it out loud. And it helps sometimes to say it in the character. Like we all have, it's like if you came to the Simpsons writing room, you'd hear like 15 horrible Homer impersonations. Terrible. Marge is the worst to do, hard to do, or Krusty or whatever, like the remote. And it helps for me, I guess that's part of my acting background as well, to sort of throw yourself into the character and be Mo for that, or be Homer. And you pitch the line, you just say it. And
then whichever line gets the most laughs is the one that goes in the final.
So you might pitch them for 15 or 20 minutes, like trying to get the joke. What is the joke? Finding the particular area of the joke, the style of joke, whatever works best. And you can usually tell, like, even though we're all people who've been there for years and years, when it lands really well, it gets a big laugh, and that's the one that goes in. So then the room runner says to the writer's assistant, dictates it out. Okay.
So the script is actually written in the room.
Yeah.
So nobody goes away and.
No, well, initially at first, yes. To backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
When we come up with new stories, we have like 1 or 2 days a year where we have our story days, where we come with our stories that we've thought of, and we pitch them to everybody, and hopefully they get a good response, and then powers that be, the head writers will say, oh, that's a good one, and then you get assigned to do that. Then you take a few days, a day or two, with a couple other writers, and you, what's called breaking the story, which is taking the little gem of the story, the germ of the story, and figuring out what are the exact story beats, what is the first act, what is the second act, what is the third act, what are the twists and turns. So the story is sort of fleshed out. And then you go off and you write. Nowadays, we don't write outlines as much anymore. We used to write like a full outline. But now we sort of just go to script, and you have up to 2 weeks to go home and write a script. And you turn the script in.
So one person is assigned to do that, yeah.
Yeah. So then I just finished the script a couple weeks ago. So I had 2 weeks off to go home or go to Starbucks or whatever, or sit in my office or whatever, and write that first draft. It's turned in, and then it belongs to the rest of the room, and then this showrunner writes his notes on it, and then we go through it and rewrite it many times as we get ready to read it.
So, working on The Simpsons for so long, do you find the process of writing and coming up with brilliant ideas and jokes, and does it get easier as time progresses, or does it actually get harder?
Well, in the story department, it's harder because we're up to 500 plus episodes of The Simpsons right now. So, in fact, in February, we're going to air the 500th episode, which is one that I wrote. So it's harder to find stories that haven't been done, or story areas that haven't been done, or that have been done in a way, sort of find a new way of doing it. So that's very hard. And then at the same time, I guess it's all hard because then we're trying not to repeat ourselves or do jokes that have already been done. And there's a lot of people there who have a lot of institutional memory of things who will remember, like, oh, we did that, 11 years ago in this episode. And sometimes that guys me, like, oh, we did that, So yeah, it's hard, and it's tricky to find stories, and when you find one that works, and you try to hang on to it and try to make it work.
How did you land on The Simpsons? How did that part of your career begin?
Well, it was really a culmination of a lot of different things, kind of serendipity and sort of stick-to-itiveness. Just super quickly, I moved out here. When I first moved out here, I struggled a lot and had all kind of crazy survival jobs. But I finally got my first job. Was working on a very low-budget sketch comedy, sort of Saturday Night Live sketch comedy show with a lot of young writers. It was a lot of our first jobs. And from there, hopefully what happened for you guys too, is that you meet people on these first jobs who will then end up sort of becoming important to you later, and sort of lead you to the next one. So there was a guy who was working on that show who, when that show ended, he goes, oh, I got a job writing for this cartoon show on Nickelodeon. We're looking for freelance writers who want to come in and pitch. So I did. I got a job on that show. So long story, super shorter. Eventually, through writing spec scripts and other things and taking a ton of meetings, I finally got hired on a show that came on TV in 1996 on the UPN network, which is not around anymore, called Homeboys in Outer Space. Many Emmys were won. No, it was just,
who was it?
No one on that show has ever done anything. Almost. The star was a guy named Flex, and another guy named Daryl Bell, who had been on A Different World, I think. It was sort of a Star Trek parody about a bunch of guys who drove an old crappy old spaceship, and it was funny. It was goofy. It was funny, but and it was one season and out, and it's still kind of a punchline. If you read like Entertainment Weekly, they still make a joke about, well, it's no Homeboys in Outer Space. It lends itself, to that. But working on that, there's a great staff of writers, and these two guys, Al Jean and Mike Reese, who had been the original writing staff of The Simpsons, had since moved away from The Simpsons to do their own things, and they were working at Disney, which produced Homeboys in Outer Space, on a development deal to create their own shows. But at the same time, part of their job was they would assign them work one day a week on Homeboys in Outer Space. So they did, and I got to know them from there. They got to know me. And then that very next season, they created a show of their own that was called Teen Angel, that was on the ABC TGIF lineup back in those days with Sabrina the Teenage Witch. They hired me for that, And then from that, I got another job with another thing, and I kept sort of working with these guys, crossing paths with them. And eventually, a few years later, they moved back to The Simpsons. They kind of stopped working as a team because the one guy, Mike, wanted to do other things, but he still works sort of part-time on the show. But Al went back and became the full-time showrunner of The Simpsons. And by that point, it was about 10 years ago, I was working on a show that we filmed in Chicago called What About Joan? That starred Joan Cusack. That did not last very long. And it was about to get canceled. I was really worried. It was like, oh, the show's going to get canceled. And I got a call. It was Al Jean saying, I have an opening on The Simpsons. Would you like to come and be on The Simpsons? And I was like, yes. So it just worked out that way. That like this sort of seed that had been planted 4 years earlier, working on this stupid show that is completely forgotten now, led several years later through connections and also being good and being a good writer to getting this job.
Let's go back to that first sketch comedy TV show that you landed. So how did that happen? Because that was really kind of your first.
That was my very first paying job in show business. Yeah. Yes. Well, that was again based on. Well, the hardest thing to do is to get an agent, and that part through a combination of circumstances was very easy for me. Which is that I came from performing, from doing this improv group. I had a partner, a woman that I used to write a lot of scenes with, that we ended up taking a lot of our scenes were about people on dates and sort of the dating life, being young and like living in New York. And she was very driven to succeed in show business, and I wanted to do well, but she really had a plan, which is we're going to take all our stuff and make a two-person act out of it, and we're going to put it up in a cabaret in New York City, and we're going to get down to LA, we're going to showcase it, and that's what we did. And we moved out here together, and we got seen. She had a connection to a manager who knew agents, who had the agents come down to see us, and we got signed to the APA agency based on our stage act, and they were going to represent us as both writers and performers. So we did not have to do, I have to do, which is what most people have to do in terms of trying to get an agent, which is like write your spec scripts and knock on doors and send out letters and say, can you please read my stuff? I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the hardest hurdle was the first thing that came getting an agent. But then once our two-person act kind of hit a wall and got as far as we could go without becoming super successful, that's when, for me, the hard work was then like writing all this spec material. I wrote spec sitcom scripts of every show of the early 90s that was a big hit then, like Murphy Brown, Coach, and I forget what else. But I also had a packet of sketches, so just Saturday Night Live style sketches that I wrote that eventually got into the hands of this guy. His name was Michael Wilson, who was producing this low-budget sketch comedy show. And I got a call from my agent saying, go meet this guy. And I was really worried I was going to come in with like new ideas, and just a bunch of new ideas. And I met with him for 20 minutes, and he just talked about the show. And he goes, well, I read your stuff, it's pretty good. We start on Monday. Well, you want this job? And I was like, yes, So then, and at the time, my survival job was I was driving a taxi cab in West Hollywood, like up and down Sunset Strip. So I actually took like a week or 2 weeks off from the taxi cab job. And then the show went on a little bit further, and I didn't want to lose my taxi cab job, so then I was working at this show during the day, all the way until 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and then I would go in and work at the taxi cab company from like midnight to 6 for a couple of weeks just to keep, and then go back home. And again, it took me a while to realize it. It took several months after that, sort of, before I could realize I was making enough steady employment as a writer to not do the taxi job anymore. Cool. Yeah.
All right. So, do you all have questions? I think you probably have a few questions really for Michael. Yes.
I had a question about the short form, because I've seen lots of student short films, and they seem to really struggle with fitting a plot and introducing characters into 20 minutes or less, and so they'll throw around a lot of very exciting stuff, but you don't always care about it. And so I'm wondering, can you give us any tips or things that you've learned from writing in short form for so long to engage an audience right off the bat?
So just for the recording, the question is about the short form, and are there tips that you could give writers about writing in such a compressed time frame?
Well, I always tend to write big, long drafts at first, and then I just find ways to winnow down or find ways to use shorthand to sort of get plot points out. But the one thing I could use as an example, and it also led to a creative decision that I was really, really happy with, which is in this Lego show. I wanted to have the bit where they try to go to the cantina, but they're afraid they're going to be caught because they're droids, and droids are not allowed in the cantina. And I like the bit where our C-3PO dresses up as a person and all that stuff. And but I realized I had to get that information out loud. And I thought of like a scene where whatever it was, like C-3PO is talking to him, or he's talking to him. What do you mean we're not allowed? We can't get in there, And then I realized the most economical way to do it, and it also worked in terms of the tone of the show, was to have him show him a little clip from the original movie where the guy says, "We don't let droids in here." And as it turned out, these people at Lucasfilm were like, "Oh, we can do that. We own that movie. It's no problem at all." I was very happy. But so it's like that kind of things so I guess to answer your question, deciding what is the most important stuff, what you want to really get there, and then stuff the plot things or things that you can find ways to truncate, and to find creative ways to sort of make things happen. But whenever I watch this too, and I think if we do a next one, I think I'll hopefully do a little better. I'm very proud of this show, but to me, it still seems, whenever I watch it, it seems like it takes a while to get going, and there's a lot of exposition up front. And I want to have another crack at it and figure out a way to get things going quicker, because to me, it doesn't really start really going until like that stuff happens where the Senate pods are all crashing into each other. Like the first 4 minutes still seem very painfully slow to me. I'd like to it would be fun for you to find a way to make it all jam it all in quicker. But at the same time, you have to sort of find pacing. You can't all just be like a roller coaster ride. So that's part of it.
But then also, whether it's The Simpsons or this, you're still working within a very rigid structure.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I think that's one thing that a lot of shorts miss. We were looking in my class. We were looking at a bunch of shorts over the past few weeks, and no matter if they were 6 minutes long, 10 minutes long, 15, 20, 25 minutes, they all followed a basic 3-act structure.
Right.
Very, very clearly too. And I think that's probably one way to get at telling a story economically. It's just like following this very rigid.
Yeah, that helped with this too, because even though, when it was on television, they threw a bunch of commercials in here and there, which is what they do. And now it's just available as a 22-minute straight-through film, but I wrote it specifically like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And it's trying to use sort of your classic, as much as I could, as kind of your classic Sid Field style 3-act screenplay structure.
Okay. Thank you. Next question. Yes, Peter.
At what point did you decide that you were going to die?
Oh, probably right away. Maybe when I first saw the movie in 1999.
You logged for a long time with this fan service.
No, that's how I felt. I was fairly sure that people would enjoy that. But then I thought it was funny that the little Miss Lee, which is sort of the Simpsons. I think the Simpsons kind of coined that joke, which is like you think he's okay and he's not. Like for instance, my son happened to be watching Simpsons the other night, and there was like a classic Simpsons joke where Homer strung a rope or a wire across the road, and someone's trying to get Homer to kill Homer for some reason. I forget why. But then Homer ducks underneath. Oh, that's right. It's from the show where Homer had Jailbird's car. And so the jailbird guy is trying to kill Homer, and he stretches the rope across the road, and Homer comes through, and he ducks, and he misses the rope, the wire, and then right behind him is Milhouse's dad, and he's holding a sandwich up, and he's like, "Oh, only the sandwich is too long," and so you're setting it up for like the sandwich will be cut in half by the wire, but his arm is cut off when he goes through. So that's sort of like there's a whole article about that joke that was in the New Yorker about this guy who wrote that joke, George Meyer, who's a great writer. But that's sort of that mean, that's similar version, sort of setting you up for one thing. Then hopefully you think like, Jar Jar got killed after all.
Well, I had a question though. But don't kids love Jar Jar? Do kids love Jar Jar Binks?
Yeah, they do.
Do you like Jar Jar
My
Binks?
brother wanted to.
No. What about you?
They did.
No? Oh man, Jar Jar is universally
Well, what's
hated.
interesting to me is, I'm sorry. What's interesting to me is that Star Wars now, and I think it's very savvy. I mean, he's a very smart guy. Everyone has their own personal experience with it. So, for instance, like I said, I saw the first movie when I was in high school. But you guys, you've seen it probably maybe in different orders. Maybe you saw the Phantom Menace first, maybe you saw what. But like, it's everyone has their own way of approaching it now, and it's sort of interesting that my son has a friend who we went to. He was really into it. And he had a bunch of stuff, and my son and I had just been to Seattle, and there's a really interesting science fiction museum in Seattle, and they had the original Death Star prop there, so it was huge. And so I said, we were just in Seattle, my son was Will, I said, Will's and I were just in Seattle, and we saw the Death Star from the very first movie, and this kid went, "You mean the fourth movie?" So I was like, "Yeah, you're right, I mean what?" So he knew it as Chapter 4, to me it'll always be Star Wars, so anyway.
All right, another question? Adrian's got another one. All right.
Yeah, before that, since 10 years, it's a really long time.
Yes.
Is there anything you do specifically to avoid burning out?
Is there anything you do specifically to avoid burning out from being on The Simpsons?
Well, I think in terms of stories, at least, I try to find different characters to sort of explore, So one of my stories was probably the only episode that is really about groundskeeper Willie. I wrote the one where he, as a kind of a My Fair Lady experiment, they turn him into a proper gentleman. So that is, it's interesting to find different ways of looking at characters, and somehow, for some reason, the last couple of episodes I've written that have been on TV have been all about Mr. Burns, and I don't know how that happened. I love Mr. Burns, but I've written like 2 in a row. One where he went to jail, and one where he was presumed, he kind of half died, and then was sort of like a little baby being led around by a park, which I like a lot. But so yeah, that's part of it. Is like trying to find different aspects, and then also I think in terms of jokes, being in the room. I was just thinking this the other day. I think there's one particular character, Nelson, who I really like Nelson, but his mother has become like a character that we use a lot now. And now often when we do Nelson's mother, we make jokes about her job, which is that she works at like a exotic nightclub. And so often that's the first place someone will go and make a joke about that, And so I found myself in the room, like one of those jokes got pitched, and we ended up moving on, but I was thinking to myself, like, we got to find something new about Nelson's mom. That I can't just do that. So it's an easy sort of trap to fall into. We'll find one character that we really like and just do them a lot, or do her a lot.
All right, I think we're winding down unless anybody else has a question. Yes?
What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in your career that you could recommend to avoid?
What is the biggest mistake you've ever made in your career that you would recommend that he avoid?
Well, I would say it was way back before I even had a career, which was to sort of avoid opportunity when it presented itself to me. So I sort of, my career got started much later than most people. Like, you guys are all in your 20s, mid-20s. Like I said, from my background, I did theater and all that kind of stuff. But I knew that this was something I was always fascinated with Hollywood and LA, and I knew I wanted to come out here, but I think fear prevented me from seizing on a couple of chances. So, like when I was in graduate school, there was a guy who was from my hometown who was a assistant director on sitcoms, and they came to New Orleans to film an episode of the sitcom he was working on, which was called Give Me a Break. It's an old sitcom from the 80s. and I got hired to be a PA for the week. And I drove a car, and I drove the director and producers, and all the producers of the show, and this guy, my friend, around to this location from the hotel. I was hanging out with them. They were really, really funny. They were these old Hollywood writers who worked on shows I grew up liking when I was a kid, like Bewitched and F Troop, and I was like, oh my God, these are like gods to me. And I was in my last year of graduate school, and this guy said, well, if you're ever in LA, give us a call, basically saying I could have probably gotten a job, like working as a PA or the writer's assistant or something on that show. And I didn't do it because I was sort of afraid, like, oh, I got to finish what I'm doing here or whatever. And in retrospect, it all worked out because I ended up doing okay. But if I hadn't, I think that was the thing where I would have really regretted. Like I should have come. I didn't have that drive. I didn't have that wherewithal to say like, I'm going to come to LA. I'm going to look those guys up, and I'm going to say, help me out, give me a job. And who knows, maybe I probably would have started working in this business about 6 or 7 years earlier than I did. So I mean, that's a way for you guys to just. And I think it all worked out, which is that like you never know where the opportunity's going to come, or you never know where. I think after that, once I started working, like you have to be somewhat careful, but to say yes to things, to say yes to something, like even by meeting it with those guys with Robot Chicken.
It's kind of like improv.
Yeah, that's true, right? Like I knew that there was probably a good chance I wasn't going to be able to do this project with those guys because it would have meant taking a month off from work. But I wanted to take the meeting out anyway, and I'm glad I did because that led to this thing. So you never know where things are going to lead, and you never know what person you meet or what job you take. Even on, I'm sure there's a version of Homeboys in Outer Space that's out there right now that could be. You might be the person who becomes your Algene, the person that is hiring you years later to do something better.
Did you all fill out raffle tickets, by the way?
Oh,
raffle things? Yeah, so pass them forward, and then we'll answer one more question, and then we'll have a reception and give away a couple copies of Lego Star Wars: The Padawan Menace, which comes with bonus features, and it comes with a young Han Solo figurine.
Yeah, by the way, that's one thing that I sweated and labored on, which is like sort of hiding this. I really worried about giving away, tipping it that he's Han Solo, and the actors sort of ad-lib some things that weren't in the script when he says, like, I thought they smelled bad on the outside. I'm like, oh, it's got to give it away. What are you doing? No, we don't want to give it away. And then it's on the outside of the box if you buy it at the store. It says young Han Solo. So I needn't have worried.
Well, I didn't, when I first saw it, I didn't know until the very end. I was completely,
good.
I thought it was just, general references to Star Wars. I didn't know that they were Han Solo.
I was very much worried that the Star Wars fans would be very upset about it, sort of like ruining the canon, whatever. This is, Han Solo was this and was that. So at one point, I honestly pitched to them, like, I was like, it's still not too late. We can still buy it back a little bit. Which would be like a Simpson-y joke, which is at the very end there when he goes, oh, hello, Ian. And he goes, my name's not Ian after all, it's Han. And I thought he could say, I'm Han. Han Rabinowitz, or his name was still Han, but he wasn't Han Solo. And I thought that could be a funny joke. But they're like, no, we're going to do this. So it was okay. But
we have one more question right here.
Yeah, I was just wondering, writing is usually such a solitary act for so many people, and so it seems like television writing is very unique in that it's a group setting. Can you speak to some of the benefits and some of the challenges of that?
What are the benefits and challenges of being in a very collaborative medium like TV writing as opposed to other media?
Well, it's interesting because the challenges are sort of being able to let go of some of your own private, personal feelings about the thing. Like for instance, like the very first script I wrote was for Homeboys in Outer Space, where I was paid. And I labored on it, I killed myself, I was up to all hours making this perfect, and I handed it in. And within 20 minutes or so of them reading it, they were already tearing it apart in terms of like rewriting it. And one of the guys said, what a great script, this is going to make the rewrite so easy. And I'm like, the rewrite? So you have to let that go and sort of give in to the whole group mentality. So that's a challenge of it, and it's often people who have troubles with that, or will get on staff and then start fighting over like, well, no, the joke works. It's a good, why are you changing it or trying to explain it? Well, what I was going for was that, those people ended up not getting asked back, for season 2. So that's a challenge of it, and that's why this thing, the Star Wars thing, was mine and mine alone. Although I had to work collaboratively with the director and with the people from Lucas. So that was fun to sort of have that be my sensibility. So the benefits of it, I think, are that you get to work with. I have a hard time sometimes, like switching when I do have to go off and write something on my own. I have a very difficult time sort of getting into that mindset. Like it's just me and my computer. That's why I have weird kind of like idiosyncratic ways of writing, which is I'll try to like have something on a piece of paper, maybe like a super quick first draft or something that I'll write on my own. Then I'll print it out, and I'll go sit in a public place, like I'll go to the movies, and I'll sit and I'll buy a ticket to the movies and get there like 45 minutes ahead of time and sit there as the movie's filling up and work on my script, or I'll go to a restaurant or something like that. And my wife, who is a writer, she needs absolute silence. Like she almost needs like the cone of silence to work. But that to me drives me crazy. So I much prefer it's people. There's an old cliche of someone saying like writing is. I don't like writing, but I like having written. I guess it's the old thing. In a way, that's true. Like I'm a horrible procrastinator when I have to work on my own. So being in a room with everybody else helps focus me, and I enjoy it. I enjoy being with these really funny people who I get to work with every day.
All right, let's pick a couple winners, and then we will have cookies outside and things.
Okay. Two? Okay. All right.
And the first winner
Is Jonathan Vermeer! All right. This was not rigged. All right. And the next winner is, let's see, Nicole.
Nicole. All right, let's thank Michael Price for joining us tonight. And we'll chat with you outside. There's some snacks out there.